ULEZ, when climate breakdown becomes a political football. In 2013, when we thought that Boris Johnson was merely a harmless, lovable buffoon, and the then Mayor of London promised what was then a controversial and deeply unpopular ultra-low emission zone for central London, ULEZ. He said the world's first ultra-low emission zone is an essential measure to help improve air quality in our city, protect the health of Londoners and lengthen our lead as the greatest city on earth. London wasn't the first, and this was clearly not the first or the last time that Boris Johnson told the public a barefaced lie. But let's move on 10 years, and ULEZ has become a political football, with the now disgraced Boris Johnson batting for the other side and on party lines.
It was a Boris Johnson policy originally. Did voters pick that up, or is it all linked to Sadiq now?
This by-election is very much linked to Sadiq because he made the decision to expand ULEZ to outer London.
Sadiq Khan's odious, unjustified tax on driving, the new ULEZ charge he wants to bring in from August.
There have been protests against the expansion. ULEZ cameras have been vandalised.
Sadiq Khan has lost Labour this election, and we know that it was his damaging and costly ULEZ policy that lost them this election.
Rightly pointed out that transport in London is devolved to the Labour Mayor of London, and it is disappointing that the Mayor, backed by the Leader of the Opposition, is choosing not to listen to the public.
The Mayor needs to reflect on it, but because it was the reason we didn't win in Uxbridge.
Yet another stealth tax on motorists.
My van is not compliant, so I've got to get rid of my van. At the moment I have to use my car.
I've got 2 cars. Probably a bit unfair, as I really don't know the lady's circumstances. But when you see a clip like that without any real context or an in-depth background story, we each make up our own narrative. I, for instance, have decided that if she owns 2 cars, then she surely has enough money to be able, with the £2,000 grant, to replace one of them with something compliant, or indeed just survive with 1 car like the rest of us do. But on the other hand, she might well be relying on the van, I think she said it as a van, for her dietary supplement business, and this could possibly be the straw that breaks the camel's back and sends her small business into bankruptcy. I simply don't know, and nor do you. The reality is likely going to be somewhere between the two, but the point is that my imagined narrative and your imagined narrative are likely going to be very different and formed based on our own particular biases and not on facts. We simply don't know the facts. But there is no imagined narrative around climate breakdown. The facts are out there and supported by all good scientists around the world. But trust me here, low emission zones, low traffic neighbourhoods and 15-minute cities are about more than just trying to reverse the, for most of us, distant idea of climate breakdown. This is much closer to home and also backed up with facts. So today we're tackling ULEZ, the ultra low emission zone that has tragically become a political football for the UK's 2 leading political parties. So let's get on with it. In case you're new to the term, ULEZ stands for ultra low emission zone. Actually, I think I may have mentioned that already. A designated area in central London where older vehicles not meeting certain emission standards need to pay a daily charge if they actually want to drive their vehicles. The idea was initially the brainchild and introduced to London by Boris Johnson, the Conservative Party Mayor of London in 2013. But the stakes are much higher than just a daily fee. Air pollution contributes to almost 40,000 premature deaths in the UK each year, according to the Royal College of Physicians. The World Health Organization reports that 91% of the global population lives in places where poor air quality exceeds their guideline limits, with traffic contributing to 80% of the particulate matter found in London's air. ULEZ is about directly saving lives. Can you imagine if it was discovered tomorrow that older versions of microwaves caused 40,000 premature deaths per year in the UK. You would have that microwave out in the trash before you could say poppity ping. So what is the difference? Psychologically, this is fascinating. We are largely happy to drive our polluting cars around and be part of the collective cause of the suffering of millions and 40,000 premature deaths per year, which does actually include our families, friends and loved ones. And then feel that this is an affront to our personal freedom when asked to replace our cars with something less dangerous. But when it is actually just our own family, friends and relatives being affected by our out-of-date microwave in our kitchens, we wouldn't even have to wait for government legislation. And there is still a wider aspect and concern to this same psychology that also allows us to cheerfully abuse our first world privilege with obscene overconsumption, whilst other parts of the world are already becoming unlivable, forcing conflict and mass migration. And our answer to this is not to stop abusing the Earth's resources, but to enact harsher and harsher draconian laws that stop these people reaching our borders. You couldn't make this shit up. But anyway, let's get back to the subject at hand. London was not the first low emission zone. The first low emission zone was established in Singapore in 1975. And then in 2006, Stockholm, Sweden implemented a congestion tax, which was initially run as a 7-month trial. This tax applied and still applies to both petrol and diesel vehicles and has significantly reduced both congestion and pollution levels in the city. Berlin in Germany followed with ULEZ, low emission zone, in 2008, and Milan followed in 2012. And since then, hundreds of cities all over the world have set up low emission zones, with the majority of them having been initially unpopular with the public and, crucially, voters. And there it is, the magic word, voters. The Conservative Party and seriously failing government of the day in the UK have found themselves hope and a political football. Let's blame ULEZ on the Labour Party and promise the voters that we'll get rid of all this green crap and maybe, just maybe, we can hold on to power. It's so desperate and goes against everything democracy should stand for. And look, you might expect this from the Tory party, which is actually in itself a desperately sorrowful echo of our times. But even worse is that Keir Starmer, the leader of the main opposition Labour Party, is now talking the same talk, kicking the same football and scaling back their own green agenda. We will get elected even if the earth burns, seems to be the rallying call of both parties. Look, when party politics means more than 40,000 lives a year, 4,000 of them in London, and more than extinction of our species on this planet, you know that the fucking system is broken. But let's look at the nuts and bolts of ULEZ and why even the concept itself is set up to fail. Well, not really fail, but not be as effective as it could or indeed needs to be. It's easy to believe that the simple narrative that the answer to our air pollution woes is just replacing old polluting cars with shiny new electric ones. But if you peel back the layers, you'll see that the real goal isn't and can't be about replacing our cars. It's about reimagining our cities. I put a video out on this a couple of weeks ago called Fear of the 15-Minute City, which you can watch by clicking here or in the description below. The point is, you can't just take away people's cars. You need to invest in public transport, making it both more convenient and cheaper than driving a car. And I can tell you firsthand, this has not happened in outer London. My own children, my own beautiful children, provide a perfect example of this conundrum. Both live and work in outer London. While they can easily use public transport to commute and actually to get to work faster, the cost is prohibitively high compared to driving their own cars. Everyone in the UK right now, apart from the super rich, are feeling the pinch right now. Inflation is through the roof. Electricity and gas bills have almost trebled since this time last year. Mortgage rates and therefore rental costs are going crazy. Where do they think ordinary people are going to get the extra cash from? This is the reality for many Londoners, especially those in outer zones. Sadly, the environmentally friendly option is not the financially viable option. This is the crux of the issue that we need to address. Oh, actually, I almost forgot. This charge will actually only affect 10% of cars in outer London. and 30% of people in London don't even have a car. But anyway, the end game has to be to get people out of cars. And we're not going to do that unless we invest in public transport. We need a carrot as well as the stick. And meanwhile, governments all over the world are still pouring billions of our taxpayers' money every year into fossil fuel subsidies when we need to be investing in clean energy and public transport. If we're truly committed to lowering emissions and making our cities healthier places to live, we need to make public transport not just available, but accessible and affordable for all. We need investment in more efficient, more affordable public transport. We need to incentivise cycling and walking with better infrastructure and safety measures. Above all, we need to create urban environments where cars are the exception, not the norm. Again, please take it to Fear of the 15-Minute City. There's a link in the description below. Simply switching from combustion engines to electric vehicles cannot be the end game. It's merely a step. It's a step in the right direction, but it's merely a step. The true victory is a cultural shift away from our dependence on individual car ownership and towards embracing more sustainable communal modes of transport. ULEZ is not an attack on motorists any more than replacing your faulty microwave would be an attack on microwave owners. Climate breakdown is the single most important issue to ever face humanity. Bigger than Hiroshima, bigger than the Holocaust, and far bigger than our ridiculous belief in our perceived right to drive half a mile to the grocery store to pick up a packet of cigarettes. Do say we are facing the end of days. We need bipartisan agreement on this. Don't say, but I need 2 cars. But what do you say? Let me know in the description below. And if you care about this stuff, and you should care about this stuff, please consider subscribing to WAPAAT for more content like this. And don't forget to smash the like button.
Air pollution. It lurks all around us, preying on the young and old. It slips unnoticed past your defenses and assaults your lungs, heart, and brain. Its deadliest weapons are invisible, poisonous particles that can be as small as a molecule. With every breath, they break through your lungs' protective barriers. There, they trigger inflammation as your system tries desperately to fight back. But these tiny intruders penetrate those defenses, lodging toxic compounds even deeper, sowing the seeds of cancer. They slide straight into your bloodstream, sabotaging your entire body. They inflame and constrict your blood vessels, increasing blood pressure until, one day, causing a stroke. The particle prowlers dislodge fatty plaque that may have built up from your diet. They weave clots that can be deadly blockers of blood flow to your heart or brain. With each new case of heart attack, stroke, lung disease, or cancer, air pollution adds another life to its hit list. Let's stop this invisible killer.
Long-term exposure from living in polluted cities increases the chance of premature death and cancer and lung and heart conditions. It also raises the health threat from COVID. The people most at risk are young children, the elderly, and people with pre-existing health conditions. Children whose lungs and immune systems are still developing, born and raised in areas of high air pollution, are likely to develop asthma, have several years taken off their life expectancy, and are up to 4 times more likely to have significantly reduced lung function in adulthood. If you live in a polluted city, your chances of dying from lung cancer are increased by 29%. Let that sink in. Your chances of dying from a stroke are increased by 24%. Your chances of dying from heart disease are increased by 25%. Your chances of dying from lung disease are increased by 43%. If you like this video, there is every chance you will like this one, or even this one.
Every borough in London exceeds World Health Organization limits for toxic pollution.
Clean air is a human right, not a privilege.